As stories come into us through our experiences, some stories are more powerful than others, depending on the moment, the experience, or sometimes who was with us, or a story that they're telling us about ourselves at certain points in our life when we're open, receptive, or vulnerable. And those stories have greater meaning than others, meaning they're always at the tip of our identity or our sense of self. We lead with them. I call them defining stories. Now, sometimes those are really powerful stories that are positive, that sustain us, that support us as we move forward into the story we want to be telling about ourselves and the vision story of where we want to go. But sometimes those are stories that are stuck stories, that constrain us, that keep us actually paralyzed from becoming who we want to be. And I call those very thin stories. Or if you're making an analogy to cooking, that would be the consomme, when what we really need to be is living in a chowder, something that has the complexity, the thickness to hold us. So when people are in a thin or a stuck story, the trick isn't to give them another story, but how to help them expand their story so that it can hold them better, hold the complexity of who they are, hold a greater potential for who they are. So it might be helpful if I tell you a personal story about, in my own life, how I worked out of a very thin story to one that is actually thicker and holds me and supports me in moments when I feel vulnerable. So when I was 8 years old, Christmas Eve, my favorite holiday of the year, I was in church with my parents, sitting between my mom and my dad, and it was time to sing the carols. It was a chance for me just to let all of that excitement and enthusiasm and spirit just fill this congregation and join everybody in that moment. So as I was belting out the glory, my father's hand came down and just went over my mouth. And in that moment, all the energy and excitement just went out of me, and a new story came up of, I'm an embarrassment. I'm too loud. I'm too big. I shouldn't put my spirit or my energy out there because I embarrass myself. I embarrass my family. That became a very deep, defining story for me. And as I watched it, not consciously at the time, but as I look back now, it began to generalize to other circles of, in high school, how often I raised my hand or took the risk to share a new idea. It took many years for me to realize that that was a defining story and a constraining story, and one that didn't serve me and actually who I was or who I wanted to be. So through a lot of work of finding alternative outcomes that other people handed me, like, you have a beautiful voice, you should sing more, or you have a lot to say, I wish you'd share your ideas. And always I would say, no, that's not true, because their stories didn't match my defining story. So through a long process of attaching these alternative stories to my thin story, I could begin to expand it to be something that could hold more of me and allow me to take more risks and grow that story so that I could, in fact, now be a storyteller. Years later, just actually a few years ago, my husband and I walked into church late. And rather than open the hymnal, I didn't bother because they were singing Cat Stevens' Morning Has Broken. And I was just filled with the beauty of the song and assumed I knew all the words, so I just started singing. Of course, I wasn't singing the right words. And my husband, who had dutifully opened the hymnal and was reading the right words, just looked at me and made just a gentle sign with his hand, enough that I was 8 years old again in church. And I found myself sitting down with the heat rising in my face because I'd fallen into the thin neural pathway of an old story and I couldn't get out. Fortunately, because I had done the work over the years, it took me just a few moments to, first of all, put my partner into the correct story of understanding his motivation and where that was coming from, what he did and didn't know, what his meaning was in that moment. Also to tie my thin story to other stories of all the work I had done and the ways that I had actually had positive moments of singing and sharing my joy that did not need to be negated because of this moment. And so by the end of the service, I actually was restored and could sing the final hymn out loud. I was no longer needing to mouth the words the way I had done for the first 30 years of my life after that first story. So the difference is not that we totally heal from those stories. We're always vulnerable from the deep, painful, thin stories of our life. But the difference is when we've done the work to have the insight and awareness of when we're falling into that hole, of how to get out and to have the recovery be sooner and quicker, such that we can pick ourselves up, move into a different neural pathway to take us in the direction we really want to go.